Hello there. Welcome to episode 9 of Knittings and Sewings, a podcast about all things crafty, or at least fiber crafty, including knitting, spinning, weaving, sewing, dyeing, all kinds of different things, and even embellishing, which I will talk a little bit about today because I do things like embroidery. Wanted to welcome you to the podcast if you're new here, and welcome back for those who are returning viewers. It's been about 3 weeks, I think, since I last podcast, and there are a lot of things going on. I don't want to make excuses. That's boring to hear for you to listen to and for me to recite. But suffice it to say, I've been really busy. This is getting to be a warmer time of year. A lot of things are heating up for me in the way of activities, and not to mention the weather. So doing more things outdoors and at fiber festivals and things like that. So there are a lot of activities going on and a lot of more things coming up for the summer. So I just wanted to touch base with you again because I do have a few things I would like to talk over and bring up and show you. So we'll get started first with a little bit of what may be a ramble. So I just wanted to hit some things head on and let you know what I've been feeling and kind of experiencing, and see what you think. If you've had similar things, maybe I'm just alone, but I don't think so. I have so many things, so many projects in my head that I would like to work on and make progress on. But for some reason lately here, it's just felt like I am walking through quicksand. I intend to go on a 10-mile journey, and instead I'm just mucked up in a quagmire of quicksand as when it comes to getting things done. So, for example, I had wanted to work on the Pinguono sweater that I've shown you in previous episodes. I'd been gung-ho on doing that for a couple months and was working on it. But when the weather started warming up in April, particularly by the middle of April, I really started losing enthusiasm for that project and just kept putting it off and not working on it. And so I really was working on not much because it just was lagging, and I realized I'm not going to be able to just push myself to work on it when my heart isn't in it. So I finally gave myself permission in the middle of April to just let it go, put it aside for a while, put the Pinguono in purgatory for a while. And so that's what I did, and so I have put that aside. I hope to return to it eventually, but for right now I really need to put it aside because it's just getting too warm and too bulky to work on it, and my heart's just not in it. If you've ever had that feeling, have you ever had any projects where your heart's just not in it anymore? So I hope to return to it, but not until a little bit more enthusiasm returns on working on it. So that may be coming up in the future, but not for now. I also just wanted to get started because I knew I had a weave-in at the end of April. So I wanted to warp up the, first wind the warp and then thread the reed and thread the heddles in preparation for the weave-in that I was going to be doing at the end of April. And so I worked on that for 2 weeks, getting that loom prepared. I thought I was going to really be ahead of the game. And the reason I was doing that is because I am preparing for a class that is coming up. I'm going to be teaching in June at a local fiber festival. And I wanted to start working on a tapestry in overshot. But it's a very beautiful type of pattern weaving. And I wanted to do that for the first time on Hutch, my table loom that I've shown you before. And that's the one where I worked up the scarf that I showed you in the last episode, where I finished it with the pink and orange. And after finishing that, I wanted to have this loom all ready to go so that when I went to my Guild's weave-in at the end of April, that I would be able to have that fully ready to go. And in my mind, I was going to have that thing ready to literally just bring the loom, tie on the warp, have it all ready to go, and then I was going to just beam on the loom and start weaving, I figured, by at least day 2, if not partway through day 1. I figured maybe even by the afternoon of day 1 I would be weaving away. And since I only needed, this was a 4-yard warp, I figured I'm going to be finished with this thing actually by at least the end of the first day, or at least, you know, certainly I'm going to be finished by maybe the 3rd day at the very earliest, or the very latest. I figured I would have a whole day on Sunday to not do too much. And so I actually planned on bringing my blue jean socks that I've shown you before, because those 2 were set aside for a long time and still have been kind of languishing. So, you know, I thought I'll bring that because I'm going to definitely be finished with the weaving project well before we're through with the 3-day weave-in. Okay. That turned out not to be the case at all. I got there with the loom, what I thought was properly threaded, and it was. I did a really good job of double checking it and checking for errors. But one of the threads during transport got pulled out, and then I had one thread threaded in the wrong part of the heddle, or one of the heddles, and then I had a thread crossing in the reed. These are all minor things that happen when you are preparing a warp. Now, I have those things, plus I was helped by a friend of mine in the guild named Carol, who's our president. She was going to help me beam on. And she also discovered, in addition to those little weaving errors, she discovered that my 3rd reed needed the string adjusted, the apron rod needed to be better balanced. You know, there were little things we were adjusting on the loom itself. And so there were things going on that I did not get actually warped until the end of the first day. I mean, I didn't get ready to go. I had it beamed on and ready to start on the 2nd day. And on the 2nd day, I realized that I was going to use a plum color warp, but it wasn't really compatible with the beautiful, shiny, beautiful blue heron sparkly yarn that I was planning on using in the patterning of it. So to suffice it to say, a lot of things did not go as planned. I left the weave-in having a great time, but in the afternoon on Sunday when I was leaving around 2 o'clock, I still did not, I had started the tapestry itself, but it took me a whole day of sampling on the middle day, so I didn't actually get moving very fast like I'd planned. I went away with 7 inches of weaving on the actual tapestry I was doing, and 2 of those inches had to be ripped back because I found a mistake I'd made. So there were a lot of just, you know, normal things that happen in weaving. With weaving, you have to be pretty precise, especially if you're doing a pattern like overshot for the first time. But I was really proud of myself that I kept calm. I didn't get upset when my expectations were not met. I just realized, you know, fairly early on that things may not go as easily as I'd planned, and I was going to enjoy the journey, enjoy the learning process, and enjoy being with my weaving friends, connecting once again with my guild, whom I had not woven with in quite some time, just being with them, talking with them, sharing with them about their projects, looking at what they were doing, and spending time rebonding with them was a treasure in itself. So once I realized that and calmed down about my expectations, let go of my expectations and just went with what was actually happening, I ended up with a wonderfully relaxing and fun weave-in, which is what it's intended to be. So that's the story of that, and that's just kind of been typical of how things have gone on many of my projects over the last few weeks. Things just haven't always gone as I planned. They certainly didn't go on a schedule that I planned. So the outcome was learning that I need to really think about the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I weaving at all? Why am I knitting? Why am I at this weave-in? You know, why? And it's come upon me too, thinking lately in the last few weeks, why am I doing this podcast? Because I like to have the why at the forefront of most of the things I do. I think it gives you a better result if you know why you're doing it. I'm not doing this podcast to make money. This is not my business. I'm not doing it to get a huge number of viewers, because obviously it's going to be a very slow growing channel. So I asked myself again the why on that. Do I really enjoy this? Do my viewers enjoy it? I have a very low viewership, and instead of growing, it's kind of grown stagnant. So I'm not really sure. I think I will continue it as long as I see value in it and others do as well. But, you know, I have to accept the fact that YouTubing, like everything else, is harder than it looks. When you watch your favorite YouTubers and you think, wow, that looks easy. That's what I thought. When I started this at the beginning of the year, I thought, I'm going to be able to do this easily. But it is a challenge. Learning to make an interesting podcast and still, you know, fulfill your own purpose in doing it. My purpose is to inspire others as well as myself in a variety of different crafts, including the things we've talked about before: weaving, spinning, knitting, crochet, all the things that I do. So I want to encourage myself as well as others to come along with me on the creativity journey and just enjoy doing it for the sake of doing it. So this is my relaxation, and that should be the why, because I enjoy it. That is why I am doing both my fiber arts as well as my YouTube. So I hope you will enjoy it too. Feel free to comment on how you've been doing lately. Are you feeling any kind of feeling that things are taking longer than what you thought, or feeling pulled in a lot of different directions and having your projects go slower perhaps than you had hoped? But I do realize that my projects are multi-stage, because I don't just do one thing. I don't just knit a sweater. I often am doing a multi-stage process, like the one I showed last time on the Queen Anne's lace tunic. There's very often multiple things going on. So I may be spinning the yarn, I may be dyeing it, I may be weaving it before it even gets to the sewing stage, or, you know, I may be spinning the yarn before I knit the sweater. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of stages, and I really am perhaps not fair to expect a quick result. Part of it is to enjoy it, slow down, enjoy the process, enjoy doing it. So that is going to be my focus, is to just continue doing, but also being aware of, am I enjoying this? And so if it's something like the Pinguono, where I'm feeling lackluster about it for a while, I need to maybe set it aside. And so that's what I gave myself permission to do. All right, what else are we going to talk about right away here? Okay, I want to talk about a couple of podcasts that I've enjoyed lately. Yarn About Yarn is one that is set in Australia. Christina is the person who produces and makes Yarn About Yarn. She is from Australia. She is a viewer of mine, and I love viewing her podcast. I'm glad we discovered one another, because we've been corresponding for quite some time on Ravelry and sharing projects. We both started off with an interest in freeform knitting and crochet, and then got into kind of freeform Sayori weaving at one time. And so both of us have kind of followed one another for quite a while. But I did mention her before previously in a podcast that I later deleted because I felt it wasn't my best. I kind of re-recorded that episode 8. So I did mention her there, but I want to mention her again because she's doing some really exciting things. Particularly, I was watching episode 32, where she showed herself doing a beautiful Sayori weaving with some white fabric, and it's just gorgeous. She shows weaving on it as well as taking it off the loom. I think she eventually intends to dye that fabric, so you might take a look at that. She also is working on she just finished a beautiful knitted dress that she's going to wear to a wedding here coming up soon. So I really couldn't believe how well that dress turned out. It's in a beautiful teal color, and it couldn't look more beautiful on her. She shows it modeling it, and I just was amazed. I was wowed. So do take a look at her podcast, particularly that episode, because she really highlights some beautifully done projects, and I'm sure you would like to take a look at that. Another person I want to point out who is also in another part of the world is the fairy Godfather. He has started podcasting at the beginning of the year like I did, and it's funny because he and I are quite different in many ways. He's hysterically funny, and I always think of myself as having a good sense of humor and being entertaining, but honestly, you can't beat. His sense of humor is just, I love it. And he is a fairly new knitter, but he's already started into design already. And he is in Ontario, Canada, I believe. He's in Canada. He goes by the name Fairy Godfather himself, and I really think that he has such a promising start. I'm really excited. He's already, doing very well, and I look forward to not only watching what he's doing knitting-wise, but watching as his designs emerge. And he's also a writer, so he's naturally funny. And I read one of his short stories in a short story collection that he did. He was part of an anthology. So anyway, I want to shout out to those two podcasters because those are ones I'm really enjoying, and I always want to mention the hard work that people do put into YouTubing, because it's not as easy as it looks. I can tell you that for sure. Another thing I wanted to touch on is what I've been doing. Like last weekend, I went with my friend Carolyn to a local event we have here called Missouri Town. Each year they do a fleece shearing, and with sheep, they naturally need to be have their hair cut. I think it's once a year, but anyway, they do a sheep shearing. Missouri Town has their own sheep, their own herd of sheep, and once a year in early May they do the shearing. And so for the second year in a row, we came back to it this year, and that was last weekend. And typically what we do is to get a fleece for a very reasonable price. This is a BFL, is their basic. Blue-faced Leicester are the female sheeps. And this year they were bred with merino, a merino sheep. But usually, each year they do have an affordably priced sheep. And we enjoy watching the shearing as well as picking out our fleece. And for me, I did it last year, and I've almost processed and spun all the fleece from last year. Not quite, but I've gotten quite a ways. So I wanted to briefly just show you how this is. I've been doing it with the Home Depot bucket here. I've been washing the fleece since I got it last weekend. I've done about 3 or 4 loads. But I just want to give you an idea. You can't smell this, but it comes out smelling kind of like livestock. It's got a lot of dirt and vegetable matter in it, and it is, it is pretty dirty. So it takes at least 4 washings in this bucket with hot water and Dawn soaked in the bucket, and I let it soak for a good 30 or 40 minutes at a time at least. And that removes the dirt and the lanolin by doing it 4 times, and then I rinse it once more. And of course, if it needs more, I do more. But in the end, what I do is, after doing that washing, I'll show you how it comes out afterwards. I'll pull out some here. It ends up being something like this after it's dry. I let it dry in my garage for a few days. And so it comes up like this, and beyond this, it still needs combing and processing because it's not finished yet. In my case, I comb it with hand combs. I put it through a hackle or through a drum carder. And so in the end, how it ends up is like this. after doing a lot of that processing, it ends up light and fluffy like a cloud, like this. And this is what I'm actually spinning up. It comes out like this. And I take this fleece now, and you know, I spin it on my spinning wheel. And then after it's spun, I'll show you one more stage. It ends up eventually in a skein of yarn. Now I can still choose, if I want, to dye this yarn. This is last year's fleece, and its name is Camilla, the fleece I did last year. I have it spun into some skeins, but I have not yet made anything with this. I want to really push myself to finish up this fleece from last year and to work it into a sweater. Probably, I still haven't decided if I'm going to dye this fiber, dye this yarn, or if I'm going to leave it in its natural state. It's very springy, and I just love this wool. I think I've shown it to you before in maybe the first episode, but I'm working on that again. Now that the weather is nice, I'm able to sit out on the deck here and do some more processing to finish up processing that fleece, and I will be spinning it. And then I'm also at the same time starting to wash the new fleece I just got. So I will probably dye one of these fleeces. I'm not going to leave both of them natural. So probably the newer fleece I have will end up being dyed. And I'm not sure what color yet, if it'll end up teal or what color. I'm kind of thinking either teal or red in my mind. If you have a vote on that, let me know. Would you like me to do a teal or a red project? Or let me know if there's some other color that sounds good to you. But that's what I'm thinking I'll be doing with that particular fleece. One more thing that I want to talk about while I'm sitting out here is I have been reading a lot. I've been listening to some books on tape. Well, it's actually Audible. And sometimes I listen on Libby, which is my library app. But I have been listening to the Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I highly recommend that book, especially if you listen to it on Audible. Listen to it instead of reading it in paperback or on Kindle, because there is a real life alien in it. It's a science fiction novel with an astronaut who is in space. He wakes up from a coma state and is the only one left alive on the ship. And he has a mission to save humanity, of course, to save Earth. And he encounters another spaceship with an alien on board who also has a shared goal of saving his people as well. And so the two of them really have an interaction and develop a relationship. And the reason I like to listen to it on Audible is because the talking that they're doing is loosely interpreted by a computer system. And the language that is coming out of the robot in terms of sound is really spellbinding. And I think it makes the story even better by having that voice come through in that electronic sounding, you know, I can't describe it unless you listen to it, but it's definitely one worth listening to. I love science fiction. And I also, you know, I'll be telling you about other things I'm reading too, but I love historical stuff. I love science fiction a lot. I've been spellbound with science fiction since I was a child, watching Lost in Space and Star Trek. So those are the kind of novels that really appeal to me almost universally. So what kind of novels do you like to read? Have you ever read Project Hail Mary or any other really good science fiction? Or what is your favorite genre of novel that you like to read? Share that with me if you would in a comment below. I'd love to hear about your favorite reading. Welcome back to the Loom Room. We're now in the room where I'm going to be working on the project I was talking to you about when I was sitting out on the deck, which is a tapestry that I am making, an overshot tapestry that I started while at the workshop. And as you can see here, you have the plum purpley thread on the warp. This is Maurice Brissaud's cotton, and it's it's 8-2 cotton, and so it's very fine. And there's then the periwinkle color, this color that is the pattern that you see with the star. This is called the Star Bethlehem. This is actually 2 thin threads of tencel together, because on the patterning with overshot, it is twice as thick as the warp. So it makes this beautiful pattern that kind of overlays the basic cloth of the plum. And so that's why it's called overshot. You use 2 shuttles. So I'm using this shuttle for the purple and this shuttle for the silver tencel. And this is the current tapestry. I'm actually experimenting with several different combinations to see what I like best. Earlier when I was at the workshop, I did a gold like this, a gold and purple combination with the same pattern. And so I was able to experiment with that, as well as many, many different color combinations. That first day I was there, first day I was weaving on it, was to experiment with a lot of different color combinations. So right now I'm going to be completing these, at least these 2 tapestries, if not even another one, to eventually put on a jeans jacket that I have over on the mannequin there. You can see I'm going to be inserting it, either sewing it on the back here, so it's going to have the woven tapestry as a decoration on the back of the jeans jacket. And I'm doing that for a class I'm teaching next month on jean jacket embellishment. So I'll tell you more about that and how that works out next month after I have the class. You'll get to see some of how that worked out. But in the meantime, I just want to show you what I was working on. What I'm currently wearing is a Diana Totten class I took on crimp cloth. And this is a little tunic that I made, a short sleeve tunic, and I fashioned it on the mannequin. So I literally took the cloth and pinned the different pieces on the mannequin and sewed it together, making, I call that designing on the mannequin. So I use my mannequin, Millie, for Matilda, for a lot of different design as well as sewing work with my weaving. So that's all we have for today. I once again want to tell you the same thing I say every time. Love what you're making and wear what you make. Till next time, bye everybody.